It's time to talk about Concord. Essentially what Concord is a hero shooter. It's a hero shooter. It is done by a studio that Sony acquired because they basically demoed the game, really liked it, and essentially went and acquired the company. It's also a part of Sony's massive live service strategy. Well, once it was massive, they then humongously cut it to ribbons. But of course, it's the same strategy that produced the likes of the Bungie acquisition and also games like Helldivers 2. So, for Sony, this is a pretty damn important thing. The problem, though, is people looked at it whenever the trailers came out, and they essentially thought, what? Another hero shooter in 2024? We don't really need this. Also, why does it look like Overwatch Guardians of the Galaxy? So it very much was not the sort of reveal that they would have wanted. Maybe you could say the thing that could turn that around is players actually getting hands-on time playing the game, and that has just happened with the closed beta for this game. Problem is, like Helldivers, this is coming out on both PC and PlayStation, and that means that the PC version, which is on Steam, has got trackable player numbers. Those player numbers were very, very, very small, and that has got people spooked. Maybe even so spooked that they're now saying, this game needs to go free to play, or else it's basically dead in the water. Because that's the thing. It's not free to play. It's following Helldivers 2 in terms of launch format and price. And if you think about it, the devs are saying that the only monetization after the fact is going to be cosmetics. That basically has it being the same as Overwatch 1. Overwatch came out, it was $40, and as we know, it was supported by those dastardly loot boxes. The odd thing, though, is 2016 was just a bloodbath for games, and not that many successful games would come out at similar price points that we're going for the PvP mass market. Now, this year also had the likes of Titanfall 1, Battlefield 1, and Lawbreakers. Lawbreakers very much existing in the same category as Battleborn. Dead game. Then another big thing happened in 2016. PUBG was extremely successful, and Epic Games were making a little game called Fortnite Save the World, where you'd fight zombies and build shit. Thing is, they took a look at PUBG, thought, oh shit, we'll have some of that, and then Fortnite happened. It was an absolutely humongous success, and it was, of course, a free-to-play game that was supported by cosmetics. Now, in that span of time, we have seen other games essentially try to do the exact same thing that Overwatch 1 did. As an example, Rocket Arena, Knockout City, and Bleeding Edge. All examples of that business model that completely just failed and exploded. Now, we've also seen some free-to-play games that try to rip out the free-to-play and basically go to a paid model. One of those is Gigantic Rampage Edition, which now, with Season 1 of Ranked about to launch, has got user reviews that are essentially turning in the game because the player numbers are low. That's because the network effect cuts both ways, and loss aversion is something that we are all very, very, very aware of. My point there being, with loads of games, as more people buy that game, the value you get out of your purchase increases because there's more and more and more players, and that's what allows a game to snowball and grow. But just as that can happen, the very opposite can happen. Not enough people buy the game for you to think that it's worth buying the game, therefore the game ends up in a negative death spiral, and you essentially have a Lawbreakers-like situation. And in that context, we talk about the big new thing from PlayStation, Concord. It's coming out soon, it's going to be $40, and it's PlayStation's next attempt in their grand live service strategy that's just a little bit less grand than was initially planned to be. Because as you may remember, last year they made humongous sweeping cuts to loads of those projects and loads of their teams. From my personal read, it very much seems like Sony just kind of wanted one of everything in the live service realm. You got Destiny for your PvE loot shooter, you've maybe got the Call of Duty project that they wanted to have to maybe fight Call of Duty, and of course here, the hero shooter. Now, it's all very familiar. 5v5 gameplay, 6 modes at launch. With those modes, there's been some criticism. Some people would say that those are the classics of the genre that you want to see. Other people would say, well, they're exactly what one would expect, and there's nothing here that's enough of a differentiator to actually make this game stand out in the market. Now, of course, the reason we're talking about this today is because people have actually played it. Now, there is praise for this game, right? The thing is, there is a core level of polish and competency that just exists, and that's because this is a game that is very obviously made by experienced developers who have done a lot of iteration themselves and basically know what they're doing. Now, the thing is, gameplay is only half of this story, because the other half is headlines, vibes, and price, all wrapped up together. When people see a game that's giving them a truly new feeling fantasy, maybe a totally new type of gameplay, I think they might be willing to put up some money. The problem is, though, if it's $40 for what looks like, on first glance, another hero shooter that resembles Guardians of the Galaxy, that's not going to make people excited. Polish, character gameplay, that's like here. It's actually well above fine, but emotionally, it's not hitting. Helldivers 2 hit emotionally. And where we learn a lot is when the devs actually try to justify the $40 price tag. They say, right, you get 16 characters, 12 maps, and 6 modes. All the seasonal content is free, and yeah, there's some stuff to further personalize your characters that'll be coming in a per season basis. And that's the extra money spent. So you can totally see, if you just break it down as a bunch of line items, I think $40 for a whole bunch of game that you just keep on playing, that's going to have a whole bunch of free content, that is an absolutely fantastic, fantastic price. And hell, we've also got to assume that $40 also includes the PvE mode that they kind of teased at the end of the beta's credits. So in theory, this is almost exactly as a game what audiences had been asking for if you just break it down by features. It's almost like an anti-Overwatch 2. It's a very clear deal. Long-term support built from an initial success, extra monetization in the form of cosmetics, that is to support a bunch of free content, but basically it's not going to be pulling a bunch of bullshit. It's not going to be the bizarre give me money please fiesta that Overwatch 2 has turned into. So why then is the $40 price tag just drawing comments, say, across the internet? Like even seeing the Concord Discord, people being concerned that the game costs money, and that then being countered by people saying, hey, look at Overwatch 2. That's free to play, and we really don't like that. And if you've been here for a while, you've probably seen our coverage of loads of $40 games, because it turns out that $40 seems to be a great price point for PvE, co-op, and AA titles. We've seen so many of them this year. I mean, Helldivers 2 told Sony that they could get a healthy audience with a $40 game, and yeah, there is concurrency stuff with Helldivers that's being talked about now, but that's a separate video that literally already exists in the channel, so let's not do that whole tangent here. What I'd say is that Helldivers fundamentally is, it's obviously a PvE game, right? And it's one that gives you an experience that you cannot really get elsewhere at that level of fidelity and scale. It felt new and different. I mean, yes, obviously there's very heavy inspirations with, with Starship Troopers. Point is, it didn't really feel like the Starship Troopers in video games itch had been scratched by something quite as well as Helldivers was able to do. It was then presented absolutely pitch perfect. It's that kind of thing, don't market your game, start a cult. And in a way, I'm not joking. Think about all the community memes. Think about the way that game is designed to basically foster a sort of collective consciousness, even with the little details of you being able to call your ship the Stallion of Freedom at the very start of the game. And so it's that novelty and that culture that gave Helldivers 2 so much of its perceived value. And that's where I think with Concord, they're having some struggles in how they're communicating this game to people, because people do not just think of a game in terms of quantity of content, list of features. No, they think about it emotionally. That is why games can sell loads of copies on day one, because the perceived value of something when it's new is literally higher, because a lot of people are willing to pay more money, even though they know within 2 months it will be discounted quite a bit. So that is to say, in a way, when it comes to pricing, perception is reality, and what they're struggling with here is perception. And the perception very much is that paid PvP games just fail in the market. Almost simple as. I think quite well put by this meme, but basically, right, Newzoo put together the most played games in 2023 by monthly active users, and you can take a look at the exclusive PvP games that are here, and when you do that, you find Fortnite, Counter-Strike 2, Warzone, Apex, Valorant, and even Rocket League, all of which are free-to-play games. Now, there is Rainbow Six Siege and COD's multiplayer. Obviously, though, COD is a unique case, right? Definitely a unique case. And with Rainbow Six Siege, I mean, that thing has been so often on discounts that basically mean it may as well be free. You'll also see that those games are at least 6 to 7 years old, which means a deeply, deeply entrenched audience. How the hell as a new game are you going to change those patterns of behavior, those habits? I mean, have you ever tried to change a habit before, even when it makes a lot of sense to change it? It's bloody hard. You'll also notice that while there's loads of shooters there, they all feel pretty damn different. Having another hero shooter, another iteration of something that people basically already have and have been able to access for a long time, that is going to be a pretty hard thing. And that's the problem with Concord. It's not going to expand the FPS audience. A game like Overwatch was able to expand the FPS audience, but again, it was new. It was 2016. Helldivers probably did do a little bit of audience expansion, but that's because it was so deeply, well, mimetic and unique feeling. It felt like a cultural event that you couldn't miss. So yeah, people would be slurped in by the gravity of that. If you're Concord, it is by default a humongous uphill battle. How do you cut through? Well, the setting and theme is maybe a bit of Star Wars, bit of Guardians of the Galaxy. The hero's direction looks like Overwatch from a glance. Game format looks like another hero shooter. Now, they're trying to cook with some competitive-friendly things. They're trying to change up the hero shooter model by not having ults and doing the whole thing with passives, which, let's be real, a lot of players will probably not like. And there's going to be weekly story. But what is weekly story? Is it just a new cinematic every week? I mean, look, the facial animations are impressive, and actually, the dialogue in those scenes, pretty sharp. Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. Thing is, though, that's not what I'm paying $40 for, at all. And that is to say that value is in the eyes of the beholder, and it's very much an emotional experience and a cultural experience. That is one of the things that makes us assign value to a game. Helldivers, you know what? See all that? All those words I just said? Let's just shorten it and call it the sauce. And that's why Helldivers 2 has got the sauce. And why, when you look at this game and you reductively think, oh, it's just Guardians of the Galaxy Overwatch, I don't care. Well, point is, it does not immediately have the sauce. Now, PlayStation do believe that there is an audience for this game. The early previews for the game have not been bad. Sony basically seemed to enjoy the game so much when they were doing some playtesting sessions that they decided to pick up the damn studio. And so that means there likely will be a cohort of players that will buy this game and probably enjoy this game. Question is, will there be enough of them to actually make a big difference for Sony? And that's where the Battlestar fan in me says all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again, because the idea of paid PvP and Sony has happened before and it's not went well. Do you remember the amazing title Destruction All-Stars? It was very bizarre. It's a PvP car combat game that was unveiled with the PS5 itself, set to launch November 2020. It was made by Lucid Studios. That's a mixture of people from Blur and from Project Gotham. That's like big names. Guess what, though? It was going to be $70. $70. And then, of course, live service with paid cosmetics. Now, that seemed to be a obviously awful idea, so what they did is the old PlayStation special of, no, let's just make it entirely free to users to download if they have got PS Plus. They've done it with Rocket League, they did it with Fall Guys. So, with that in mind, how well did this multiplayer title with a brand new IP do? Well, what we can do is take a look at this chart that shows full game titles on PSN ranked by revenue and downloads until the 11th of June 2023. That, of course, from the hack that happened last year. And you'll see that this game is ranked 323 in terms of digital revenue, and even worse, 395 in terms of downloads, with 20,000 downloads total. That kind of shocked me. I just thought so many people had PS Plus and would probably download something that would have been a larger number, but there you go. Very much not the case. And I suppose that's the risk of PvP games. They feel inherently so much more winner takes all than PvE. Because in a PvE game, you can pop in, you can have your fill of game while it's still new and fresh, you can leave happy. And if the player counts absolutely tank, well, you know what? You can still fire that up with your mates who have got the game and you can play some of it later. But with PvP, people treat that as if you are investing your time in the right sport. And I know that might sound a little bit ridiculous, and not everybody is trying to be a Valorant person. But, that's likely why the $40 thing here is scary, because this is a game targeted at FPS fans. FPS fans will therefore be thinking it's a new game. Takes a long time to learn a whole bunch of new maps, to learn a whole bunch of new abilities and all of that stuff. Am I going to bother, or will I just wait to see if this game has actually got legs? That's the thing. It didn't matter that I enjoyed my time playing Lawbreakers. Not enough people played Lawbreakers for Lawbreakers to basically continue existing. And so with Concord, that's why, even though it looks really polished, at the end of the day, the vibes are just off, and the amorphous thing that is the sauce is just not in this game. And I think people can tell. The funny thing, though, is we may be having this discussion again next year, and that's because of Fair Game Dollar. I think it's probably supposed to be Fair Games, but hey, they called it Fair Game Dollar, so I'm just going to call it Fair Game Dollar. Now, it's a game that's coming from Haven Studios. That's a studio founded by Jade Raymond, and it's a game that, compared to Concord, I actually think could have a little bit more sauce, and that's because it's a competitive heist game. Few games are doing that, and yes, you do have the likes of, say, a Payday 3 that is in the heist video game space, but Payday 3 kind of struggling. Payday 2, getting a little bit old in the tooth. Like, I think it's just obvious to most of us that that's just a game that could just have legs in today's market in a way that it really does not look like Concord can. Now, that being said, there is one way that Concord can change up this narrative, and that is the open beta, because that's where we're going to see some true Steam numbers. With the closed beta, the Steam numbers looked awful, and that reflected minuscule pre-orders. Obviously, why are you going to pre-order a PvP game when you don't really know if it's going to have legs and take off? That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. No, a game like this is not one that's going to be getting amazing pre-orders like Overwatch was, because it was big and new and amazing and whatever, people hadn't seen it before. No, the thing that can change the story for this is if it actually blows away mass audiences when they can do the PC open beta. And if that open beta then gives lots of really good numbers that then translate into positive headlines. But of course, that's not enough. It's not enough. Even if you are a game like that, like say The Finals, that had strong public tests, that is free to play, that can, you just go, you can play it almost right now, depending on your internet. But even though it is sitting there with between like 15, 20,000 players, maybe 25,000 players, decently consistently, even though that's the case, guess what? It still fell below its company's expectations. And now people are probably worried about The Finals. And even with that, The Finals is a game that I think had quite a bit more cut through with the public, because when you looked at it, you saw the pretty damn impressive destruction tech. People remembered that from the likes of Battlefield. They saw this fast-paced game that looks really fun, so it had a lot going for it, and even it has struggled, even though it was free to play. That just means that I think, Concord is going to have an extremely rough time, and in a way that's not necessarily the fault of the game. It's just, it is what it is, and it's probably the wrong thing for 2024, and that must hurt a hell of a lot if that's the thing that you've been working on. One of the sad facts is often it's not about how hard you row, it's about what boat you're in. And if you're not in a winning boat, well, there's only so much you can do to change that. That definitely is one of life's more sobering lessons. So there you go. On that dismal note, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back again tomorrow with more, so I'll catch you then.